Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Valerie, and I'm the communications officer for Jetta Tokyo. And it's really awesome to see everyone here, whether you're joining from Japan or US or somewhere else. Today we're going to be doing part two of the Horizons Japan Career Series. And last time, I think you guys were talking about making Japan home, but today we're getting into something that people find pretty intimidating, which is job hunting. So, a huge thank you for co-sponsoring to US Jeddah for co-sponsoring this series and for making cross-chapter programming like this happen. And thank you, Brett, Christy, and Takeshi for sharing your knowledge with us today. And then our moderator for today is Jennifer Butler, and she will be taking it from here. And now I'll hand things over to Jessica from
Hey,
US Jeddah.
thank you. So welcome everybody on behalf of US Jet AA. Like Valerie mentioned, this is part two of our Horizon series. I also am very excited to be partnering with Jet AA Tokyo. It's always fun to have to partner with a chapter, especially one that's across the pond. So that's fabulous. And I'm really happy to be collaborating on this particular program because it responds directly to the interests and the needs that we've heard from so many in our really wide JET community. So for those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Jessica Livingston. I was an ALT in Hokkaido from 2003 to 2006, which is a long time ago now. But now I'm the executive director of US Jet AA, which is the US Jet Alumni Association. So we're a nonprofit. We're based in the US and DC. And, our whole reason for existing is to really serve the US-Japan relationship through both personal and professional pathways. And of course, also staying connected socially. It's especially important to stay socially connected to all of those JET alums that we love. So how to get a job in Japan is one of those topics that comes up again and again. And I know it can feel exciting, but also unfamiliar and kind of difficult to navigate, and honestly, just kind of opaque, I think, in general. So that's one of the reasons I'm really glad to be hosting this particular session with JET Tokyo and to be able to draw upon a really outstanding JET network to bring in professionals who work directly in recruitment and career support to share their insight with you. So tonight's discussion is really intended to help inform you all about what the process looks like, how to approach it, and also to share realistic expectations and just kind of roll back the curtain a bit on what job hunting in Japan actually looks like, the challenges that people encounter, and how to prepare for it thoughtfully. So I want to thank all of our speakers that are here today. They have so much expertise and they all showed up because they're here to help you. So just to give you an outline, we're going to start with a panel discussion, and then the last 30 minutes is going to be specifically for Q&A. So each one of the speakers is going to host their own breakout room, and you'll be able to hop in and out as you please. You're also welcome to put questions in the chat, and if our speakers are like more talented than I am, and they can do two things at once, then they're welcome to answer them during the panel discussion. But if they don't get answered in the chat, just know that you'll have that time at the end for the breakout Q&A sessions. I also wanted to say I have a feeling that the topic of visas will probably come up because it goes hand in hand with working in Japan. So I want to give a quick disclaimer that while our panelists may share information regarding visas, none of them actually work for the Immigration Bureau of Japan, nor are they visa specialists. So if you have questions, you need to consult an immigration lawyer or Japan's Immigration Bureau or your nearest embassy or consulate if you're on the US or overseas side as appropriate. So they're definitely going to be sharing, things that they've heard or read, but just know that you should do your own research before you move forward on anything. Okay, so with that disclaimer out of the way, I am going to hand it over to Jennifer Butler, who is not only a longtime friend in the US-Japan space, but also the perfect person to moderate the conversation tonight because she has navigated finding a job in Japan multiple times. So with that, I will remove myself and hope that you enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Valerie. I think this is such an exciting topic, and I'm really happy that we have been able to tap into our resources to really dive into it with all of you here today. Hello, my name is Jennifer Butler. I am originally from the United States, but I've been living and working in Japan off and on altogether about 12 years. And so I'm really excited that I'm able to moderate this panel today. So welcome everyone to part two of the Horizon series. And I think that one of the great things about the JET community is that we can really tap into our passions, but also the practical side of being able to do what we need to do as a career and how that connects with Japan. So, for example, myself, I was a JET, an ALT in Shizuoka from 2001 to 2004. And I loved the experience, but through that experience, I realized that teaching was not for me and that I wanted to explore other options. But based off of my JET experience, I also knew that I really enjoyed the education space. And so then what did that look like after JET? What did that look like in terms of jobs and careers? And so I've been working for about 20 years now, 20 plus years now in Japan related work, some way connected with education or with international intercultural exchange. And I've been most recently back in Japan for the past 8 years. And I've worked at three different organizations following my studies for Japanese language at the IUC, the Inter-University Center for Advanced Japanese Language Studies. And so working at those three different organizations, I'm currently living in Tokyo, but how did I navigate that path? I'll be very happy to weave that in as we also talk to our panelists, because how does it look? How does it look to find what you need from the US, from whatever country you might be from, or even from here in Japan? And so let's talk about it. And so what we're going to do now is have our panelists introduce themselves. So to get us started, I'd like to ask our panelists, each of you, could you briefly introduce yourself, share your current role, and a little bit about your experiences helping others find work in Japan? I think we're going to go in the order of Brett, Christy, and then Takeshi. So Brett, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you very much, Jennifer and Jessica, and everybody else who's here today and got this organized. I'm really happy to be here. I live in Tokyo. I'm from Canada originally, but a friend of the United States. So thank you for having me for that on that note as well. I worked in Hyogo for 6 years, which I know is uncommon, but during the COVID pandemic, anybody who went home couldn't come back. And so the government extended those on their fifth year to a sixth. So I'm very unique in that sense where I did jet as long as possibly possible. And then immediately I moved to Tokyo and I went back to kind of my roots, which are international business and consulting. That's what I majored in university. And Nisshin Global is a small company in Shibuya. And what we do is we help Japanese companies that are succeeding locally expand overseas. And usually they don't have that knowledge within their company. So we try to provide that kind of outward branch or that international business knowledge and support them within. Even though it's consulting, I would say it's more of a partnership. So we usually kind of stay connected with these companies long term. And our time can be limited, our teams. So what we end up doing after we introduce our companies to overseas markets is that we'll actually find some young foreign talent that can take over those kinds of roles hands-on. And in many cases, for example, if that company is exploring the American market, then we'll find American talent that can come into that company and start to lead or spearhead that initiative from within. And for that, on that note, we have a national brokerage license from Japan, which is necessary for introducing talent in this country. And since I joined the company about 3 years ago, I started to position JETS as a unique pool of talent who can really contribute that international knowledge and language skills for these Japanese companies. And that's where I kind of come into play. So since I joined my company, I started doing free career support seminars as well for current JETs on the JET program who are trying to navigate that job hunt. And I've had a lot of experience of trying to introduce talents to companies. Up till now, I've had limited success. That's kind of true. There's a lot of different kind of things that we have to keep in mind when we're talking about working for a Japanese company and what they're actually looking for. So I hope that some of that insight will be valuable today. And I would say that in terms of my unique addition to this panel, I know what the company's looking for and the exact issues that they're trying to solve when they're looking to hire talent. But as a former jet myself and somebody who's really trying to get jets into the workforce, I know also the jet perspective. So I think I'm a unique person to be able to kind of bridge that gap in knowledge.
Mm,
And hopefully we can all try to find the best path forward for each of us. So thank you very much. I'm
awesome.
looking forward to it.
Thank you, Brett. That's wonderful. Really appreciate that introduction. And then how about Christy?
Awesome. Brett, I learned a lot there. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing.
Cheers.
Um, Hi everyone. My name is Christy Ishii. I'm born and raised in California for about 18 years, lived here, and spent some time in Los Angeles for school, and then went straight to Gunma from LA. For 2 years, was an ALT in Tatebayashi, in case anyone knows who that is. Um, Loved the town, and I moved to Tokyo and did recruitment there for like bilingual talent who are looking to work at gaishike companies, so foreign entities in Japan. Like a lot of other people, someone's in Tatabayashi. That's amazing. Hi. That's great. I worked at Tatsu. So I am one of like thousands, I guess, of people who were laid off during the pandemic. And unfortunately, that happened in 2020 in April, while I was living with my partner in Tokyo. And after having spent 4 of my full adult years, 4 years in Japan, I'd never worked in the US, and so I came back home. The reason why I'm telling you that is because that was the kikkake for me to start my own coaching business. And so for about the past 6 years, I have focused so much of my energy to help other people go through like relocations, repatriations, expats in both the US and Japan, navigate like the layers of transition that we go through, especially as Jets. And so this is a unique place to be. Amazing connections all around, especially folks in this panel and even people in the audience. So all of you see your names here. I mean, obviously keep things private to a certain degree, but just know that everyone here has such valuable information. And so to get more to the specifics, I am also like a career therapy coach for expats in Japan and the US in one hat. I also work at Pasona North America. We are a subsidiary of the larger Pasona group in Tokyo and one of the leading HR companies here in the United States for about 40 years. And I work with the marketing team, so I get to work with every different department at Pasona. And so although I focus more on candidates, so folks who are looking for jobs. I also love to insert some of the coaching things, and so that is free through Pasona. And so if you ever have any questions navigating your career in the breakout rooms, probably a great reason to contact me either now or later would be like career pivots, mission-driven careers, and trying to navigate a path that works for you rather than copying somebody else. So I'm so happy to be here and pass it over to Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. I love how we all have our personal stories to tell and how that informs what we're able to bring. And so that is adds so much value to the discussion we're going to have today. But last but not least on our panel, Takeshi, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everybody. Nice meeting you. This is Takeshi. And maybe I'm the not only person who is here today. And maybe some of you thinking, why is he here? So, long story short, is I'm from Ishikawa in the countryside. And when I grow up, there was no foreigner. And up there, the jet teacher was one of my first foreigner I met in my life. So, I was that teacher that maybe you are in a school, like somebody who is touching you. Can I touch you? Why your nose is so high? Why your eyes are so big? I was that kind of a kid. And that made me think about, okay, I want to see the world. So meeting that teacher changed my life. And after that, I decided to move to Spain. As I grew up, I went to high school in Spain and university in Spain, and it changed my life. And after that, I went back to Japan to start my career. And then now, once I got my daughter, I came to States to grow my kids in here. So I live in Texas in here, and then our company is a recruiting company, Japanese recruiting company. Of course, we support for Japanese company for overseas to hire the local candidate. But my passion is I wanted to bring it back something for the Jet community because jet teacher changed my life. So you all doing this is changing some kids' life. So I want to do something, to bring it back. So that's why I'm here. And brief introduction, our company is we are from Japan. We have about 2,000 agents all around the world. We have in Germany, Amsterdam, France, London. We cover all Europe. And in US, we have 7 locations around the USA, and then 2 in Mexico and Vietnam, Thailand. So what we were doing is like when Japanese company go for overseas, we support them to localize their businesses to local candidate to work with them. But this year we started to support on the opposite. When we support for that local company, a Japanese company in there, they start asking, well, we need a headquarters site, for more global talent in there. So I'm started collaborating with our team in Japan. We have 2,000 agent working with the company. Start introducing like what's the benefit for the global candidate in there. So that's why I'm supporting them. And then I believe, as Brett said, like a jet candidate is a great opportunity for them, to be the bridge in there.
Right.
So that's why here I am. So I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Takeshi. I think Jessica put in the chat, it really is a good reminder of the work that we're doing. Sometimes it can be hard, but knowing that it might actually make a difference, and you are proof of that, it means a lot. So thank you for being here as well. And so we have a lot of things to discuss. So I want to go ahead and jump right into some of the questions that had have come up as we were thinking about this topic. And what we'll start with is just a little bit of like place setting, right? How we want to look at the environment that we're going to be diving into. And so, panelists, from your perspective, what are some of the biggest differences between job hunting in Japan and job hunting in the US or other countries? As we heard, Takeshi has, experience in a lot of places, as well as everybody else. But what are those big differences between job hunting in Japan and job hunting in the US? And I think maybe we can focus on two sides to this, like from the candidate's perspective and then also from the company's perspective. And we've touched a little bit about this during your self intros, but let's dive a little bit deeper. Who would like to start us off?
Takeshi-san, do you
Okay,
want
I'm
to
gonna
start?
go. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about the company side. So
Okay.
what the company thinks about it. So in US, maybe if you all are from US, like US company when they hire somebody else, they are thinking about the time frame. It's different US and Japan side. In US, they are thinking about somebody who can start working within 1 month or maybe longest 2 months. So if you have to be available like once you receive the offer maybe 2 weeks notice maybe including some vacation at least like 1 month later 2 months later somebody can join for that so they are looking in the short terms but in Japan it's not like that they know that for those candidate who is working need to do hikitsugi like have to pass the job to the successor or something like that so they are thinking about hiring somebody like in 6 months time, maybe sometime longer, it's one year time, which means their decision making time is also taking longer in Japan. So you have to be more patient in Japan. There might be more steps in here, but in US it's much quicker. So if you live in US, never have done job hunting in Japan, be patient. Like it's gonna take longer, but also you don't have to be ready at that moment. If you're thinking like in 6 months or something like that, then now at the moment you can start thinking about it. Like if you are thinking about after August, something like that, this is right time. You can start right now. It's not too early. But if you're thinking in US, maybe it might be too early. If you submit your resume now, you might be rejected because it's too early. So that
Yeah,
is one thing like for company size is different for the timeline. And
right.
then next point is different. It's maybe something like a decision-making step. So
Mhm.
US company is more quick, like a first interview, second interview, then go for offer, something like that, much
Right.
easier. But in Japanese company, you may notice in one interview, you might see like a 5, 6, or 7 different interviewer. You may not see like who's gonna be the decision maker, like why are they here? So it might be very uh, value, like
Mhm.
who you have to attract, maybe you have to attract all of them, and they are trying to get the consensus with
Right.
several different person on it. So in US, you work for your boss, so you have to impress your boss, and if your boss like it, then you're gonna get a job. But in
Mhm.
Japan, in the interview, don't talk only to the boss, but also for those who are all of them in the
Mm,
interview, they might have their own opinion as well. So
right,
be careful, to talk, like a decision making step is longer, and then
right.
many people is going to be involved in the decision. So
Thank,
that might be
yeah,
things that differently. And then
yeah. I think those are
especially
really
for the
great.
decision making, maybe for the negotiation process as well.
Right. I
Japanese
understand. And so I
company,
think that's really important points, like to realize that there's things from the company side that's going on behind the scenes and that timeline might look different between the two
yeah,
countries. And then of course what your own behavior is within the process. And maybe Chrissy can talk a little bit about the candidate side. What does that look like
yeah.
from the difference between the US and and Japan job hunting?
For sure. And I'm going to preface it with, of course, like every situation is different. So I'm just covering like a very, overall perspective. Uh, Folks know in the US, right, when you're networking or trying to get a job, so much of it is really the introductions and the referrals. It's a lot more self-driven, less recruiter-oriented job hunting. We have experience, we're like many of us are experiencing layoffs, niche markets. There are, I will say, some English only roles in Japanese companies in the US. So that exists, but it's, you kind of have to look for it on your own or work with a company like Quick or Pasona, to be honest. But there is a clear line of management. And so I think there's a lot more transparency when you're applying for a company stateside. When you are applying for a company in Japan, not only are you now facing the time zone difference if you're not already in Japan, if you're looking for a role, there are different sometimes, like obviously the hiring cycles, the budget's different, the fiscal year is different in Japan, obviously starting in April. And so typically you'll see roles coming out at different times of the year than some of the roles that come out in the US. And so keeping on track, keeping up to date on like, or doing your research on like even a gaishike in Japan, depending on what company it is, they might even run on the fiscal year in a different country, not the Japan timeline. So uh, it's really, really like every situation is different. So do your research. But also in Japan, as a candidate looking for jobs, there are a lot of specialist roles that do require high concentration of like Japanese. And so not every single role is going to be like that, but it is it is absolutely inherent that you check and see like what kinds of roles are going to require the Japanese or not.
Mhm.
And just it's more or less defined
Mhm.
when you
Mhm.
are job hunting in Japan, I would say overall.
Right. And I appreciate that doing the research is part of the responsibility for the candidate in order to make sure that they are positioning themselves well to be able to understand what this process looks like from the country to the company, with the size also making a difference as well. And so I think that this is something that can kind of help us transition to our next question. Is like what kinds of opportunities, companies, industries, or fields tend to be the most realistic entry points into the Japanese job market? Um, because for foreigners, right? Because as you know, Christy was saying, there might be different styles of jobs that will be more or less attractive. But as Takeshi was also saying as well, the planning for this might be very long timeline depending on what the company is looking for. And I think that if we are going to examine this question, maybe we can look at, you know, figuring out what this looks like at the different entry levels of job experience as well, right? So what kinds of opportunities are out there? What's realistic entry points for the Japanese job market for foreigners? And where are we looking at in terms of your career experience? Brett, what do you think about this question?
Yeah, great. I'd just like to say thank you to both Takeshi and Christy for sharing their insights on that previous question. I'll just say also a preface before I answer this that, as Jennifer outlined, I'm working with current jets. So a lot of these kind of opportunities that I'm dealing with day to day are for people in entry-level positions. And what we have to keep in mind is what value are we adding to a Japanese company that they don't already have within their company? And I'll actually share information from our friends at Claire. So my company has a booth at the Jet Career Fair every year. And so they kindly shared information last time about what the companies at this career fair are actually looking for. And the majority of them are looking for to prepare global leaders who could like lead an overseas branch in the future is one. Another is unique perspectives that you could bring to the company. And another is bridge personnel connecting Japan to the world. And I would say that the majority of the opportunities I see day to day are this third one, so bridge personnel. What that means is that they're looking for somebody who's a native English speaker, which I think most of us here today are, but also somebody that understands the cultural dynamics and also Japanese language. So you can act as that bridge between the Japanese company and overseas. And what that would look like day to day would be marketing or sales roles, right? For the most part. And so you're doing English marketing focused towards overseas companies, markets, partners, distributorships, helping to negotiate contracts potentially, running those SNS platforms or newsletters or kind of cold calling, reach out, and then going in person to those international trade shows and trying to represent the company overseas. That's what a lot of these entry positions are. And you wouldn't necessarily have to think strategically maybe on your own, although that's a plus, but really just kind of being that charismatic entry point for those companies and really kind of bridging the Japanese side with the foreign side and using those kinds of intercultural communication skills that you've developed on your time on the JET program or maybe whatever you have in your historical career background, I think is the majority of those entry level positions. That being said, if we're talking about industry, I would say Japan is a country full of great engineers and a lot of creativity in terms of products. And what I see most commonly is a manufacturer who's had great success locally in Japan, creating some kind of product, and now they're looking to sell that internationally. So these kinds of opportunities of joining a very Japanese team that has a great product and they're ready to sell it overseas is the majority of the open positions. I would say the other two that are common is anything that's inbound visitor facing. So tourism is one. Another could be like university or school programs that are targeting international students. The reason being, you'd be using your English day to day to interact with those people, and that would be your competitive advantage over maybe somebody who's Japanese and not speaking English at the native level. So um, I would say those three industries are the main kind of entry points. And whenever we talk about manufacturing, of course, there's all kinds of different kind of industrial differences, but
Mhm.
I would say those three. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. I think that really helps to kind of put us like help to make it clear in our on our own side, especially with the needs, the real needs from the companies on the ground, and also the value that Jets can add with our specific skill set. Christy, what about you? What do you think would be some realistic entry points for the Japanese market, especially maybe not just at the entry level?
Yeah. So, for my point of view, like I love what Brett was sharing because that's a very realistic way to look at the Japan market. I think the people that I've like had the chance to work with through coaching and supporting folks, it's actually been down to more like more the creative and education path. And so this side, I mean, Jets, I think, tend to gravitate towards more like mission driven, not everyone, sorry, but like sometimes the people I work with tend to go towards like mission driven organizations and really want to make an impact. And so what I've found to be quite exciting for people and where they found success is actually working for like media companies, but not super large ones like Dentsu, but like smaller, like media, for example, like G Plus Media, like the one that does Gaijin Pot and Savvy Tokyo. And there are a lot of landing pads for people if you just look for it or contact, people like us and we can connect you to the right areas. I think what the assumption is that, if you're in Japan, you have to kind of give up what you want to do and just go for something that you can do. And I'm a little bit more on the side of like, no, you can do what you want to do. It might take a few more years to like get into that exact role that you're looking for, but it's absolutely possible as long as you are realistic about what Brett was saying is like your value add to the organization. Obviously, having Japanese is a huge plus and can really bridge you into something that is more like something that you're passionate about. But I've worked with people who have combined both their skill sets and their value add as like somebody who's not necessarily Japanese to the organization. But sometimes those don't always happen. Most of the time, it doesn't happen at the same time. It's usually
Mm.
like one or the other comes first, and then eventually you get into a career, kind of like in my situation where I can use both skills that I love to like share with people and also be in this US Japan space. So it takes time, but it's absolutely not impossible. And so I would just recommend keep whatever it is that you do want to do top of mind and also give some intentional thought to it because the hardest thing to do is to job hunt when you have no idea what you want to do.
Mhm.
And it's okay to not know what you want to do, but taking a pause in your career, taking a moment to really reflect, talk to one of us so that you can really be honest with yourself. That will help more than anything else, in my opinion. So thanks,
Thank
Jennifer.
you, Christy. That's such a great point, especially, understanding that there might be people coming who are more seasoned professionals. There might be people coming who already have some skill that they've developed after doing JET, going back home, figuring out that they're working in this industry for the few years and that, okay, it's time for me to get back to Japan. So they're bringing some really specific value. And it might be something that's passion driven and skill driven. But it also might take some time, which kind of goes back to our first question about doing your research and making sure that you have some plans of action in place. And so if we are moving then to, okay, now I've figured this out. I know this is what I want to do. I know what I kind of have an idea of my skill set. Do I actually find the job opportunities in Japan, right? So let's talk about some like effective ways to actually find jobs. Do any of our panelists have suggestions on particular platforms, recruiters, networks, or strategies that people should be aware of? And I'll jump in here just to share a little bit of my own background of how I was able to find my positions thus far, because it's tech, it touches on all of those ways. One of the things that I did after JET was I went back to the US. I was working for a while. I figured out that, oh, I want to be in this field, but I need to improve my qualification. So I went to graduate school. And my graduate school allowed me then to access possible opportunities that needed minimum master's degrees to look for, to be considered for the position. And so then I came back from grad school and was working again, and decided, okay, now I want to do this in Japan. And I realized, again, I need to enhance my skills. So I applied for the IUC, the Inter-University Center, because I needed to improve my language skills. And then while I was at IUC, I was doing very strategic networking throughout the whole year I was at IUC. And I found my first position out of IUC through a friend who was in an alumni group. It wasn't JET alumni, but it was another alumni group that I was part of. And we happened to be in the same place at the same time. And so the that connection was they knew my background and my skills and what I was looking for. And they also knew that there's another company that was right at that moment looking for somebody for that same thing. So introduced that way. So that was network for sure. The second way I found a position was on LinkedIn. I had my eyes open after working several years and I was thinking, what's my next step? And I saw a really interesting post from a company that I was following on LinkedIn. And I was thinking, okay, this would be really, really helpful to look into. And that was, I guess, more of the platform side. But also during this time, I was working with recruiters to try to find a position. And I didn't have as much success with recruiters, I have to say, because of my specific background and skills. And so I was able to find the position that I'm in now, also through a network connection from somebody within the industry that said, oh, this new position is about to open up. Maybe you should consider it. So that's a really kind of encapsulation of the way that we can use our skills, but also the things that are available. Can I ask our panelists, what kind of suggestions do you have for what people should be looking out for to navigate this job search? Takeshi, how about we start with you?
All right, thank you, Jennifer. I like your story. Like I totally agree. Like if you have hard skill, then might be much easier. You can go on your on the website, internet, you can find for that. And if you have a hard skill, some of Japanese companies don't require Japanese skill. But if you don't have a hard skill, then you go for entry level. And when you go for entry level, you have to go get your Japanese level at least for N2 or N1. So to get the job, even you try on online like applying for that, if you don't have hard skill, if you don't have a Japanese skill, then doing everything online might not gonna pass you. You don't pass the document screening. So in that case, next step might be like other ways, using a recruiter, like as Brett said, those recruiting company who are specialized for foreign talent. We have the way how to represent for the candidate, why are they needed and why how it's going to be effective for that. So Japanese company need to run the benefit of working with those talents. If you don't have no hard skill, not many strong Japanese skill, then using for recruiter is one of the way to present yourself as well. And the other example is in here in US, so many Japanese company are starting doing unique way of the recruiting. They recruit US candidate in US side, and then they dispatch the candidate to Japan for headquarter in Japan, and then working in there for a couple of years, and then bringing them back to the headquarter. That kind of things is start happening too. So maybe it might be long-term things, but go back to the US as well, and then join into the Japanese company in US, and then come back to here or go back to the US to get hard skill first. And then once you have a hard skill, then much it's gonna be much easier to run some job in Japan. So that might be the step that might feel like how to get some jobs in Japan.
That's wonderful. I love that kind of combination. Again, you're adding value. You're adding value from what it is that you can contribute uh, practically and understanding culturally and being able to um, have a support team that can advocate for you as well, especially if it's not as clear. What about, and I think there was a question in the chat about how do you find the recruiters? Well, we got some folks here that will be able to share those resources with you later. We got a panelist that is doing this very thing. Brett, would you be able to talk a little bit about about what you would suggest for this question?
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm happy to. I would say that I agree with everything that Takashi just shared with us for sure. I think that if you have hard skills, for example, if you're a lawyer that happened to go on the JET program before starting your career, you're probably going to have an easier job than somebody without that kind of qualification. That's just one example. N2 is certainly the bare minimum, N1 would be ideal. It makes you competitive. It's hard to get through screening otherwise. This is just the reality we work in. I want to say just something that I think Jennifer covered, but I really want to emphasize how important it is. Networking is so important. Um, Somebody you meet in an event could change your life. I think all of you joining this event shows that you're all trying to focus on that as well. You never know who you're going to meet, so try to bring your best self to each event you go to. Try to talk to who you can. Jet AA Tokyo is doing a great job of organizing events on a monthly basis, and there's so many great people within our alumni network, and really try to make the best use of that. A lot of us are connected to Japan in some way, so one of our, fellow alumni, one of your senpai could definitely hook you up. You never know what could happen. So bring your best self to each event, try your best, work on your skills when you can, be realistic maybe in what value you're adding, and just try to focus on, like Christy said earlier today, on the things you really want to do. Because at the end of the day, that also shines through in an interview and when you're talking to people. And so if you're passionate about what you can bring to the table, then I think that will be kind of, organically convincing. So
That's great. Thank you, Brett. Yeah, I should mention before I pass it over to Christy, before every position that I found, I think before the one right after IUC, I found through the JET alumni network. Every
Mhm.
position. I I was working at the consulate for several years, saw that through the JET posting. I was working at international school, was a JET connection. So all of this still, it's very organic in a lot of ways, but we also know what we need and we know what we can
Mhm.
add value to in our world. And so that is valuable. Christy, what about you? Any other effective ways for, platform strategies for job opportunity search?
Yep. Yeah, just dropped it into the chat. It's a list of places that I've gone to for job hunting. So just to read it off, LinkedIn is a place where I'm on that every day. I don't think everyone should be on LinkedIn every day, but that is just where I'm at personally and professionally. If you use it and utilize it and make connections, you have access to millions of people across the world that you otherwise would not be able to contact or know about. JET alumni networks are for me also where I found essentially both of my jobs since leaving the JET program. So after JET, went to create my own coaching business, but then after that, I found a job at Via Programs, which is a nonprofit, great company if you ever want to work with students from Asia. Uh, the Northern California JET chapter group page is where I found that job. And when you're networking and you're connecting with somebody who has a job that's a JET, it just makes it so much more simple. They understand you. They obviously have a JET or even more JETs at the organization. So US JETA, JETA Tokyo, they have, I mean, you have networks all across Japan. There's AJET, of course, that you already know about. JETA USA, which is a different entity. US Japan Council, if you're not a part of that and you want to go into corporate, you absolutely need to be a part of US Japan Council. You have to be nominated, but for under 40, they have opportunities where you don't have to be a member and you can just join. Those are typically in the larger cities, so that's going to be like Osaka or Tokyo, but that's a great organization to be a part of, especially for US Japan. That's like one of the top tier organizations. Tomodachi Initiative is part of that. So it's a public-private group. So privately, US Japan Council sponsors a lot of Tomodachi Initiative things, and this came out of 311. I'm talking really fast because these are all really important organizations to know about. University clubs, they have those in Japan. So if you graduated from a university in the States or anywhere, oftentimes they do have a club in Japan as well. And so you should really connect with those people. You can also connect with them online if you have a LinkedIn, which I highly recommend. We also have TAC, so Tokyo American Club. I'm if you've been in Japan for a minute, and especially in Tokyo, you've at least you know where that is as an American, or you should. American Chamber of Commerce has a lot of events. The membership for those two groups vary a little bit, but there is the Next Gen Roundtable group as well that I was a part of when I lived in Japan, and uh, they often have public events that you can at least inquire about and ask to join. And if you're not a member of something, you can always ask to be like a volunteer for an event if you can't become a member. Um, I added some other things there, but the last thing I'll say is you don't have to be networking to network. Like it doesn't have to be a professional setting. I've met so many incredible people through doing hobbies that I enjoy. And so I just really
Mm.
encourage you to do what feels comfortable to you. Get out into like out of your comfort zone to network, but within a place that is comfortable, I think is
Right.
one of the easiest transitions to go into meeting new people. So I'll just
That's so helpful. Love those resources. Don't worry, everybody. Christy was dropping those in the chat, but we're also gonna, I believe, Jessica and Julie are gonna send out a list of resources to everybody later as well. So have no fear. But I just want to reiterate that I think that the Jet AA job board is a great resource. There are all kinds of jobs that are there that will be able to that people who post on there know that the Jet community is valuable. And actually, I just posted a job on the Jet A job board day before yesterday, and so I enjoy the reach that that gives. And I would like to point out also, Christy was sharing lots of good resources for on-site Tokyo-based, Japan-based options and connections. Brett was also giving some really good insights about, what the bigger global market looks like, as well as Takeshi. And I would also point out that don't sleep on the non-US jet options. So sorry, US-Japan option. So of course we are very much focused on US-Japan relations in this group, but Japan also has so many opportunities in countries and regions outside of the US and North American space. And those countries and regions also need internationally minded Japan experienced people. And so that is an option to consider as well. Not to take anything away from our US-Japan relationship, but Japan is bigger than just the US and Japan. All right, so let's talk a little bit then about what we talked a bit about this in one of the previous questions about what does the typical job search hiring process look like in Japan? Um, I know that this might be a bit different depending on the size of the company or the um, how traditionally Japanese it might be. But Brett, could you talk us through what a typical job search and hiring process might look like in Japan?
Yes, so it differs depending on whether you're in America or if you're in Japan. I'll start with Japan. If you're a current jet, then you would be on the instructor visa. So the first thing that would happen is you would have to change for your change of status. You'd have to apply for it with the Immigration Bureau. That process typically takes about 3 months. It requires some information from the company side, but you'll be the one that in person will eventually give it to the Immigration Bureau. So you'll have to be on top of that paperwork. Um, I think one word of caution I should really mention is that if you're a current jet and you get hired, for example, by a like a corporation, like a business company, you're going to be applying for the Gijin Koku, like the International Specialist Visa, Engineer Visa. Um, that's a change in status. And so if you are actually on the ball and get that change of status too quickly, you're no longer legal to work as a teacher. So be very, very aware of the timing. If you plan to work until August, then you should probably try to time your application for your change of status for like, June. And then when you get that new permit of status, your previous one is no longer valid. So be very careful about that. Um, that's one thing. It usually takes about 3 months, but that's pretty straightforward. What becomes a little bit more difficult, I think, maybe actually Christy and Takeshi know more about this than I do. Oh, I'll just say as a quick note, I also shared an opportunity with one of my clients on the Jet AA job board, and he was hired from America to a company in Japan. So we have experience with that as well. But and that particular individual was hired to be kind of raised as a future manager of their US branch. So this is kind of one thing that can happen. But in that case, the company on the Japan side will apply for a certificate of eligibility. And what that consists of is they have to kind of verify that only this one person can do the job and not a Japanese person. And this always comes into play, right? Like they would rather hire a Japanese person. So you really have to validate the fact that only this American can do it, not anybody here currently in Japan. And then whenever the Immigration Bureau will okay that, that will come in the mail to you in America. And then you will fill out the paperwork on your side and you'll take that to your nearest consulate or embassy. And then after another month or so, then you'll actually get your visa and then you can go to Japan and you can start your new life. But that process will take a little bit longer than if you're in Japan because there's just that extra step involved, usually around 3 months. In terms of the interview, sorry, and stuff outside the visa, in Japan, you would usually apply for the job. You'd do an interview after the screening, and if you're successful in that first interview, then you'd be scheduled for a second interview, which is going to be with probably the senior leaders, and then there's usually a third interview with like the CEO of the company. Just it's more of a formality greeting, saying welcome to the company. And so that process also, Takeshi mentioned earlier today that this process can take a long time. Like it can sometimes take even just to be hired, not alone like the visa application can take 3 months sometimes. So be prepared for kind of a long process and a little bit of bureaucracy, to be honest. But once you get through, it'll be good. So
Like I think navigating bureaucracy and being patient are skills that Jets develop in spades,
I think
even
so. Yeah.
after living and working in Japan for so long. Thank you, Brett. Takeshi or Christy, anything to supplement this question about this actual typical job search and hiring process in Japan looks like?
I agree with Brett, what he mentioned. I think that's exactly how it is.
Mm.
Mm, great. Yeah, and I think that that process, that formulaic kind of process does see itself repeated to different levels and different extents, depending on the type of company, for example, or the industry that you might be in. Um, but something that is a bit of a universal, whenever we're talking about working in Japan or working for a Japanese company or for a company that does require some kind of Japanese language ability, is what is realistic for language ability. This is a question that we need to be transparent about, that we need to be honest about, and also that we can explore a little bit more. So, what should job seekers think about language ability realistically? What levels of Japanese open the doors, and how can someone move forward if they might not be quite at the level that we and have identified as being necessary? Takeshi, what do you think for this question?
So what I talk with my client, to introduce a jet candidate, they require most of the time N1 or minimum N2. The reason is like, as we mentioned, like the candidate might be working for overseas market, so they're gonna talk with the client in English. So it looks like if it's English is good then enough. But the problem is you're gonna be joining in the company as entry level, so they have to train you, and those trainer is unfortunately not fluent in English, so they needed to somebody at least who can understand the instructions and then learn the businesses in Japanese because the company is running all in Japanese. So unfortunately, like N1 is like a very good step for it, and but minimum N2 that might be the thing. So if you start thinking about getting a corporate, if it's corporate, maybe start running more Japanese level up, at least
Yeah.
mid N2. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that that seems to be a really common into working proficiency at a minimum for kind of being able to prove or justify that you will not be causing problems due to
Mm.
language at the company that you might be joining. And I think that there is some additional things that we want to think about when it comes to the Japanese language ability and current immigration changes. Brett, could you walk us through a little bit of that?
Yes. So I think as Jets, we've all known for a long time that N2 is kind of like the unofficial barrier to entry to working in a Japanese company, like after the Jet program. This new administration here in Japan, the new government is becoming a little bit stricter on visa requirements. And in the paper as recent as on Wednesday morning here in Japan time, in the Nihon Keizai Shinbun, which is the Japan economic newspaper, there's an article that it's now new guidelines in place as of April 16th. And what those guidelines are, they're not law per se, but what the guidelines are is that if you have a role which uses Japanese, especially with like Japanese customers or clients, N2 is absolutely necessary. That never used to be the case for the visa. I mean, for in order to receive the visa, right? Um, there's a little bit of gray area where, as I said, it's not a law, it's more guidelines. So it comes down to the discretion of the immigration officer who's reviewing your case. And to my understanding, and Jessica said earlier, I'm not an immigration lawyer, so take it for what it is. But my understanding is that if you, for example, were applying for an American company, and it was the language that the company operates in day to day is English, then you would no longer be held to this N2 requirement. Other exceptions are people who graduated from a Japanese university, and that's even if the program is in English, right? So I think the next session of this series is going to be about an MBA program in Japan. So that may be even more valuable moving forward. But
My
yeah, so
master's in Japan.
yeah. So graduating from a Japanese university. The other is if you completed an exchange from a Japanese university. Those people are also exempt from the N2 requirement. And then also those who have stayed in Japan for 20 plus years are also exempt from the requirement. So what it means effectively, like I said, it's guidelines, it's not law per se, but these immigration officers now have this in writing that they have to be aware of this when they're evaluating your case. And so Japanese companies that are looking to hire foreign talents, it has a level of risk where if you don't have N2, they're probably just not going to put you through the screening process. I think that's the reality we're dealing with this new legislation.
Thank you. And I think that there's always some maybe feelings of frustration because whereas there might not be a certificate that you have in hand that says that you are proficient at some level, you still are able to, JETs, I think many JETs and JET alumni still are able to communicate in Japanese, or they're able to understand the culture, understand the workplace. And so there is that value added in that sense, but then not having the actual certificate on paper does then make it harder to prove that as you're moving through the interview process and all the different people have to sign off on this. And so I think that being strategic again and using time wisely, enhancing language skills practically, but also on paper might be a really smart step when we're considering work in Japan or in Japanese companies. Um, and I think that, if we're not just talking about language, like acquiring language skills, but also talking about how we want to enhance our time while we're on the JET program or even after JET, staying connected with Japan. Once someone finishes their JET program and wants to stay in Japan post-JET, but they don't have a job lined up yet, what could be some recommendations for practical next steps for people in this situation? Let's see, who would like to jump into that one? Takeshi, how about you?
Okay, so I have one good example. There are some schools in Japan providing MBA courses in there. Because if you don't have a hard skills, running MBA might be a good thing to prove that you have international business background. So you have more chances to get into the corporate. And then meanwhile, you're running MBA. In that time, you can improve your Japanese level as well. And then most of those MBA school, they help you to get the visa after the MBA as well. So as we said, like a Gijinkoku visa is getting difficult, how to get the N2, something like that. But for the business specialist visa, I forgot the name exactly one.
Mm.
I think code skill visa. That one is a different one, and then that one is now requiring MBA. So MBA or some certain level of the work experiences. That kind of thing is going to be required. So having MBA is going to be open up to apply not the Kijinkoku, but different type of the visa as well. So I think if you don't have the job running out after the JET, then sign up for MBA and then get the hard skill and then get one more another optional things about visa as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think again, being practical, being strategic, doing research, and then also, enhancing your abilities and attractiveness to companies is so, so important.
Yeah.
And
One thing I
if
have to
you
forget
are
is I think
interested,
JET provide some how do you say scholarship. I think
yeah.
Jessica might
Mm.
know more. Like JET alumni get the scholarship for the MBA, so check for those information as well.
Right. And it's not just MBA, it's other master's programs as well. But we are very happy to invite everybody back to the next part three of the Horizon series, where we're going to talk all about master's degrees in Japan and the different ways that you might explore or make this make sense for whatever your own plans are. But that's really helpful for that post-jet period. Brett, what about you? What other advice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. I think Takeshi covered that wonderfully. One extra thing I think that's really, really cool. I know that this one is very, very competitive and might be difficult for or not applicable to everybody, but there's a great program called MEXT, and it's a full ride scholarship to study at Japanese universities, and I think that JETs are pretty qualified to apply for that. One of my close friends who I did the JET program with in Hyogo, he returned to America for 1 year and then came back and went to Kyoto University on the MEX scholarship. So I know one close friend that has been able to do that. So I think if you really, really are passionate about returning to Japan and can really see your future here, MEXT is a really great opportunity and it's worth applying for or looking into at the very least.
Yeah, the next program, again, it's very helpful. as an option. It is a long process, similar to what the
Mm.
JET process was. So again, you got to plan in advance. It's not just something you can wake up and decide you're going to do and,
Yeah.
be sent to school in the very next semester. So make sure that you're looking through that. Also, there might be some, as we talked already, maybe you have some flexibility in your future plans. Enroll in a Japanese language school, help get your qualifications for a certificate. That might be a really helpful next step after JET. And then there are some really good language schools here in Japan that are familiar with sponsoring people with visas, but also making sure that you are getting qualifications that you need, especially whatever your future plans are. Christy, do you have any JET, suggestions about post-JET options?
This one. Many jets have gone into recruitment. Doesn't mean they stay there, but it's the gateway job if you don't speak N2. And that's what I did. And honestly, it's a great way to see what people make because unfortunately, there are no HIPAA laws that are like the US. And so you see everything about people. But fortunately for you, that means that you can pick and choose an industry to go into and know what the going market rate is. I think it's a
Mhm.
fantastic place to start. Being a salesperson as a recruiter is one of the best foundational skills to have in any type of job. So I'm speaking more to entry level folks,
Mhm.
but at any stage of career, it's
Yeah.
incredibly helpful, has helped me so much in my career path, even if you're in it for just a year or two.
Yeah, I think that's again, I think people are under the impression that whatever their next step is, that's going to be the thing they have to do for the rest of their life, as opposed to making the best decision for your next steps, making sure that still makes sense for you. And then if not, making another decision and changing to something else. But having that connection, having the skills, having the network is so important. And before we move into the breakout rooms, because I think we can be able to just keep talking all day if we could, but we want to make sure we have a chance for people to ask us individual questions. I would like to ask all of our speakers, can you just share briefly one final piece of advice for anyone looking for a job in Japan? Who would like to go first, or shall I just call on somebody? Okay, one piece of advice, Takeshi, go.
All right, I will try to be very quick. So I still remember that I love that message which Christy mentioned at the beginning, that at introduction. I love that, think about long term. I know that you want to stay in Japan, but just keep staying right now, or maybe there's some several way. Looks like it's a long way, to get you a dream job, but just for entry pass to stay in Japan, maybe being keep doing the English teacher might be not your what you wanted, but if that's the one, to stay in there, then go get it and do the recruiter at the first, and then go for next step. You, I wish you get something dream job from the first step, but it's not always like that. But
Right.
at least to go for one step and then think about long term. That way you don't have to stress out too much. You are not missing your time. You
That's
get in
right.
there one little step. So
Little step by step. That's a
yeah.
great piece of advice. Thank you, Takeshi. All right, Christy, go.
Okay, so sometimes, speaking to like anyone at any stage of career, sometimes life has better plans for you than you could have ever imagined. And I hadn't always thought about things this way. I'm a extensive planner in my life. I got my first job after Jet 6 months before I ended Jet, and I forced, like not forced, but I told the guy like I will be here in 6 months, and he was like, I hope you show up for work, and I'm like, of course I will. But I learned through a lot of unplanned experiences that actually sometimes it's okay for things to change. And so I welcome change now. And I think that it's totally like aligned with what Takeshi was mentioning, where uh, it might not be the direct path tomorrow, but uh, I could never have imagined the way that my career unfolded had I not gotten chosen to go back home. I didn't want to go home. I would have stayed in Japan if the pandemic didn't happen, maybe married that guy, I don't know. But things worked out, let me tell you, and I absolutely love what I do. I'm so fortunate that I get to do this work. Um, and so patience with yourself, give yourself grace in the process, and also it's okay to you can still be intentional even as you're going through transitions. So.
Thank you, Christy. And I think that's when all of us were interviewing for JED, we all were being evaluated for a really specific criteria. I mean, a lot of the criteria, but one of them was being able to adapt to change and being flexible. So I believe that that is a quality that JETs can really tap into, even beyond the JET program. And Brett, why don't you close us out here? What's the final piece of advice for anyone looking for a job in Japan?
Yeah, great. I mean, everything is has been covered. I think it's been such a great conversation, even just for me. I feel inspired as a participant on the fail, to be honest. Thank you everybody for your great insight. I want to actually just kind of reemphasize something Christy mentioned earlier today. Um, Being very intentional about your job hunt. I interview a lot of people, like, tens of people per week, and I find sometimes people don't really have their own vision. And I end up ending the interview. Well, I don't know what to do with you. You didn't convince me of what, you know what I mean? I hate to be like kind of, harsh, but like you really have to say, I want this specific role, and this is why. Like I've oriented my whole life towards becoming this kind of person. So believe in me. Because if you come to me and you say, I just want a job, it doesn't really matter. Like I could do marketing, I could do fashion, it's like, well, I mean, that's not really a convincing narrative, is it? So I think you really have to put the work in, do some studying, research what you want to do, and really be passionate. And that will come through in your interview, and that will convince people. So if you want to work in Japan, really, really try to envision what that would look like for you and what kind of job that looks like, and portray that in your interview, and look for networks that could lead you in that direction. I
Yeah.
think would be my final piece of advice. And if you're a current jet right now, I mean, unfortunately, we just explained N2 is required. So if you haven't been working on your Japanese, you can start tomorrow. If you really want to stay here, spend your free time studying Japanese. Download that Japanese kanji app. Go to that
Mhm.
ECC in your local area and start speaking to those teachers in Japanese. There are things you can do, but it could start from tomorrow. So
Yeah.
that's my final piece.
Thank you, Brett. And I appreciate that everybody is able to have both practical, realistic, and inspirational comments throughout this panel discussion. And I think one of the great things that I kept hearing is communicate, talk to people, get information. Don't be afraid to let people know what you're looking for, because then they might be able to give you that piece of advice that really helps move you in the right direction. And so my final piece of advice is to stay positive. I had a
Mm.
very long job search at one point in time, and I was getting quite discouraged, but it was through talking with Christy and talking with Brett and talking to Jessica and the other JET alumni family that I was able to, stay focused and ended up in a place that I really enjoy and love, and with the work that I'm doing here in Japan. And so with that, I think we still have time for breakout rooms. Is that